trotted after Maisie, as she and her dad went outside and down the steps to the beach. The tide was out and the sea was gleaming a silver line in the distance. They walked down to where the tide had washed up bits of seaweed, plastic bottles, shells and other stuff. Flame nosed about, crunching up the bits of dead crab and enjoying the interesting smells. Yuck! I wouldn't fancy your breakfast, Flame, Maisie whispered, pulling her face. Flame purred, chewing. Can you purr? Her dad began sorting through a big pile of seaweed. What are you looking for? Maisie asked him. I'll give you one guess. Bits of driftwood? Maisie asked. Got it in one, her dad replied. Maisie grinned at him. Her dad was brilliant at carving birds and small animals. She knew he planned to make some from pieces of sun-bleached driftwood and sell them in the new gallery. As Maisie drew closer to the rocks where she had found Flame the previous day, she saw a tall boy poking about in the rock pools. The boy glanced up and saw her. He smiled and waved. Maisie climbed a steep bank of sand which had blown against the rocks. Flame scrabbled after her, but his short legs sank into the soft sand. Maisie picked him up and tucked him under one arm. Hi, you must be new around here. I'm Joel Deming, the boy said with a friendly smile. He had floppy brown hair and wore a red t-shirt, cut-off jeans and battered sandals. He looked about 12. Hi, I'm Maisie Simpson. I've just moved here with my parents. That's my dad back there. We've moved into that house, Maisie said, turning and pointing up the beach. All right. I noticed someone had moved into the old cottage. Hey, that's a really cute kitten you've got there, Joel said, noticing Flame peeking out from Maisie's arm. He reached out to stroke Flame. Flame purred as Joel rubbed the top of his head. Yeah, he's called Flame. I haven't had him long, Maisie told Joel. Do you live nearby? Remembers how long Maisie has had Flame? A year or two? Yes.
Just yesterday.
Just a day. Well done.
Joel nickte. Von deinem Haus aus ein Stück die Straße hinunter. James Simpson kam angeschlendert. Er lächelte Joel an. Hallo, ich bin Marys Vater. Na, nach was hältst du denn hier Ausschau? Freut mich, ich bin Joel. Ich habe Seeanemone, Napfschnecken und ein paar Krabben entdeckt, antwortete der Junge. Eigentlich hatte ich gehofft, ich würde eine Seegurke finden. Was ist eine Seegurke? Gurke kennen wir alle. Seegurke. Ja, aber eine Seegurke, Lakshana? Und es ist aber kein Gemüse, sondern ein Tier, genau. Es ist ein Tier, das heißt nur so, weil es ausschaut wie die Gurke. Mary grinste. Ja, guter Witz. Nein, ernsthaft, antwortete Joel, ohne zu lächeln. Man kann hier unglaubliche Sachen finden. Ich schreibe immer alles auf. Willst du mal sehen? Er zog einen sehr zerknitterten Notizzettel aus der Hosentasche. Wenn ich nach Hause komme, übertrage ich meine Notizen. Er grinste Mary und ihren Vater an. Mein Dad sagt immer, ich interessiere mich mehr für Pflanzen und Tiere als für Menschen. Mr. Simpson lachte und warf Mary einen Blick zu. Tja, vielleicht wirst du hier am Meer auch mehr Zeit draußen verbringen, anstatt stundenlang Adler und Falken zu spielen. Dad, stöhnte Mary und wurde ganz rot. Manchmal konnte ihr Vater wirklich peinlich sein. Was ist denn Adler und Falken? Fragte Joel verwirrt. Das ist ein Spiel für die Playstation, sagte Mary. Sie war erstaunt, dass er es nicht kannte. Ach so, ich interessiere mich nicht so für Computer. Joel sah kurz gelangweilt aus, doch dann hellte sein Gesicht auf. Die besten Tümpel findet man in der Schmugglerbucht. Da will ich morgen hingehen. Ich möchte es euch zeigen, wenn ihr Lust habt. Danke, ich habe leider viel zu viel Arbeit mit dem Haus, antwortete Mr. Simpson. Aber du kannst doch mit Joel mitgehen, Mary. Ich weiß nicht, fing Mary an. Sie hatte keine Ahnung, ob es Spaß machte, im Wasserloch und Larven herumzustochern. Aber vielleicht war es besser, als Kisten auszupacken oder zu streichen. Besonders, wenn Flamme mitkam. Alles klar, ich bin dabei, schloss sie. Super, strahlte Joel. Ich hole dich morgen früh ab. Wie es aussah, hatte sie es geschafft, in kurzer Zeit doch noch einen zweiten Freund zu finden. Sei vorsichtig, okay? am nächsten Tag aus der Küche, als Mary in den Flur gelaufen kam. Joel wartete an der offenen Haustür. Keine Sorge, Mrs. Simpson, rief er ins Haus hinein. Ich kenne mich in der Küche bestens aus. Er trug Wanderschuhe und eine Weste mit vielen Reißverschlusstaschen. Ohne auf Mary zu warten, drehte er sich um und schlenderte die Straße hinunter. Mary stellte die Tasche auf den Boden ab. Kannst du da reinspringen, Flamme? Der Weg ist ziemlich weit. Flamme lief zu den Schrank. Sprang er in die Tasche. Mary hängte sie sich um und lief Joel hinterher.
Hey, wait for us, she called. Us? Joel turned round with a puzzled look in his face, and then noticed Flame's head sticking out of her bag. He frowned. What have you brought that kitten for? You'll have to take it back. I'm not leaving Flame behind. Where I go, he goes, Maisie said firmly. Well, okay then, Joe said grudgingly. But make sure you look after him. I don't want him getting in the way when I'm rock pooling. He won't, Maisie said. Flame's a very unusual kitten. He's I mean, he understands every word I say. What was that word? She was almost going to say that. Yeah.
Magic.
Right. Sorry. Right. Joe rolled his eyes before setting off again. Maisie was starting to think that this was a mistake. Joel had seemed friendly the day before, but today he was treating her as if she was just a little kid. She fell in step with him as they turned into a lane and took the cliff path. As they walked along, Joel pointed out tiny islands and told her the names of the different rock formations. Maisie was impressed. She had to admit that Joel knew a lot about this area. She could see that Flame was enjoying herself. He purred as he looked out of her bag at the sea and sniffed the salty air. After about 15 minutes, the path sloped downwards until the cliff was more of a steep slope. Joel paused near some large flat rocks and boulders above a small cove. The cove was like a beach. Looking down, Maisie saw a semicircular beach surrounded by dramatic rocks. Wow! Look at that! What an amazing place, she whispered to Flame. Flame nodded. This is Smuggler's Cove. Wreckers used to lure ships onto those rocks and then steal the cargo, Joel said, pointing to where the surf was crashing on some black rocks that stretched out to sea. There's a cave a bit further along where they hid their stuff. Really? Said Maisie, shuddering inwardly. The sunlit cove suddenly seemed sinister and unwelcoming. Joel glanced at her pale face. You needn't be scared. That was ages ago, he's gone. I'm not scared, said Maisie. Good, because I don't fancy turning back now, said Joel. We can take a shortcut by climbing down over these rocks. There's an easier way down, but it's another 10 minutes walk along the cliff path.
Mary beugte sich vor und spähte nach unten. Ihr wurde etwas mulmig. Es war so tief zumute. Ich gehe vor, sagt Joel und sprang auf den ersten Felsen. Dann sah Mary an. Obwohl, ehrlich gesagt, es ist wohl doch ein bisschen steil. Und wenn du es nicht gewohnt bist, gehen wir doch einen anderen Weg. Besonders in Turnschuhen und mit Flamme in deiner Tasche. Am besten nimmst du doch den leichteren Weg. Geh einfach hier den Pfad entlang und dann kommst du weiter. Du kannst die Abzweigung nicht verpassen. Dort steht ein sehr altes Schild mit der Aufschrift Schmugglerbucht. Aber kommst du denn nicht? Fing Mary an. Doch Joel antwortete nicht. Er blätterte rein für die Felsen nach unten. Mary starrte hinterher. Sie konnte es nicht fassen, dass er einfach losgegangen war und sich selbst den Weg nach unten gefunden hat. Na, ganz toll, sagte die Flamme. Flamme stellte sich kleinen Ohren auf und hörte aufmerksam an. Mary beobachtete
Это я в детстве помню, в библиотеке были списки. У вас и определенные, да. Они проходят сквозь него, но не почему. Она не цепляется.
future.
Wonderful.
I just thought if we stayed for two, we would all just be sitting there listening to the story in a way, and it might be nice just to have, because in a minute we'll have lunch. But it gives you a chance just to
Yes.
have some conversation about it.
I just love how natural it is. It's just totally seamless. You don't see the join. And it's just the children.
So the children aren't kind of all sitting there going, oh, what are we doing now?
But it's also, it's just so. And a lot of classrooms are set up like that. You can just pull that language in there at the same time. It's just so natural, beautiful. And it was really good to see the story at the end as well. Really, really powerful.
It's interesting as well to see some of those children. You still have some children who take a very, very long time to acquire the other language, and other children who they. There's a little girl in there that was sitting at the table where the German was going on. And she's only been in school for, well, I suppose it's 18 months now.
Yeah.
She was in first grade and now she's in second grade in the same class. And she was talking to the teacher in German. It's not all perfect, but she feels very comfortable speaking in German, although we're still more of an English-speaking school than German.
Yeah.
But because all of those, because the languages go on at the same time in the classroom, there is this sort of a natural feeling that, okay, this is, we speak in different languages, and that's, we use those languages that are available to us. So.
And it's the equivalence, so much that power base again. It's coming back to the fact these are equivalent languages. It's not the tail, it's not following it, that's the equivalent. It's really beautiful.
That was the thing right at the beginning. I mean, Therese was a huge influence on what we're doing now, 15 years ago, 14 years ago, whenever it was. Isn't that amazing? Yeah, in terms of all of our thinking about learning. I think I was the big language lady, but Therese actually belonged to this school 15 years ago. And so all of the thinking that Therese was helping us to understand in higher thinking skills influenced the way that we felt we could work with children in the classroom. And then we were in the other building then. We were in a building with just a couple of classrooms, and Therese would come and talk with the children, but she'd also talk with the parents about how the brain works and learning. So it was interesting talking to Jennifer King yesterday, and they've been doing some discussion work on the team, and I said, gosh, it reminded me a lot of the early days when we were talking about what we believe about assessment and so forth, and she stood there and said, I really miss the early days. That was a teacher, But it was lovely that Dasha and Sasha, that little bit of Russian, could come and experiment with you. When I went to Sasha next door, I said, would you like to come and just say hello to our Russian-speaking guests? And she said, oh, I've been waiting for this all year. I think she only knew yesterday that you were coming, actually. But
all my life.
But the thing that I liked most from your school and now from yours is that everything it's accepted. I mean, when we were talking about the traditions in the assembly, everybody giving their opinions on what they their conclusions were about all the working we did that week. Everything was right. So everybody wanted to give their ideas because everybody was right and would say
they weren't afraid of being wrong.
Of course. And in your case, with your language, for example, maybe that girl you talk about, the German language, I'm sure she's not afraid of make a mistake or misspell, because it doesn't matter.
That's a really interesting point, because Baden-Württemberg, which is the land that we're in, the state of Germany that we're in, the newspapers yesterday were full of this statement that some teachers in Baden-Württemberg are still teaching invented spelling. They call it Hörsinn or something, where you listen to the word and you try to write it the way you think it might be. You don't wait until you know how everything's spelt. And Baden-Württemberg is very angry with those teachers who are not telling the children you can only write words that you know how to spell them.
Straight away.
Straight away.
Right, straight away.
Amazing. Can you imagine what would happen to speech if
Yeah.
you said to children, don't use a word unless you know it already, don't make any mistakes.
No.
You'd never say anything.
Well, you do, you shut down immediately.
So it was really interesting. And we think here it's important to do both.
Yes.
It's important to teach the structure of spelling rules and the structure of spelling and to decode words, but also sight words are okay,
Yes.
and learning in context is okay, and predicting what a story is going to do, and all of those things. I'm going to just try and see if I can put this on here, because this might be just to show you what happens in the classroom next door, for example. Just another form of team teaching. This is Bianca and Liam, so it's the same. This is the same teacher you saw in this classroom. Now this is working with the 3rd and 4th graders, so it might be just interesting to see. They're talking about. It's interesting because as soon as I went into it, I thought of you and the moon. But they were talking through the moon thing. So it's just quite interesting to see how. Perhaps if I put these a little easier to hear.
Sí, vamos a explicar.
Can you see it? Is it?
Yes.
When it starts again, then it's going
So this is a class discussion. She's speaking in German, he's speaking in English.
Right.
This is going to be useful for when you do your work later. You have to show with the diagrams and labels.
Genau, also du meinst, die Größe ist das gleiche wie die Größe, nur andersrum? Okay. Deshalb war ja erkannt, dass es genau andersrum ist, aber dass hier dann immer wieder die gleichen sind.
But what's different about them, even though they look the same? Here it is. So there's different terms the other way around.
One question.
Just as an example of just having two people working, you
Yes.
can be separated with your group, so you can be reading a parallel story, or you can be just taking a discussion in both languages.
He was translating what she has said, or
No, he was just continuing the
Okay.
the discussion.
So the English teachers, or the teachers who are speaking in English in the classroom, they also understand German
Sometimes.
sometimes, yeah, not all the time.
It's our optimal situation is if we can, but it's been very interesting because of course if you don't understand German and you're the team teacher, that doesn't last very long.
Yeah, you pick up on the
We
language.
pick up on
pretty
the
quickly.
language.
Yes.
So it becomes very interesting because we said at the beginning this can only work if the English speaker understands German and the German speaker understands English. And then of course we got this gorgeous young American teacher who didn't speak German. And I thought,
Can't see but
I can't let somebody go who's a fabulous teacher.
Yes, it's a pity.
What do I do? So she joined the class, and because she was a wonderful educator,
yeah.
when the children spoke in German and she was speaking in English, and then she'd say, okay, I'm lost. I didn't
Lost.
follow that bit.
Yeah.
Who could help me with this?
Yes.
So the children would translate so she understood.
Oh.
So not for each other, for her.
Yeah.
Yes.
So she started, so that became a tool for learning.
Yeah.
And then gradually she started to learn German. And so, yeah, she wasn't in that monolingual state for long, but she spoke French. It's often helpful if you speak some of it.
Yes. Yeah. Very interesting.
So they start learning Germany from the first day
Yeah.
that the pupils go to the school?
Yes. This changes in middle school. Well, it doesn't change, but they still learn German in middle school. But from 6th grade upwards, they get separated for subjects. But our German and English teachers work very closely together. So they do some projects together in the middle school. But they also separate, so they separate for language and literature, which is like language A. And then they separate for language acquisition, which is like language B. But then they come together for projects.
Yeah.
So sometimes they'll study a novel, and like here, they'll be studying it in their 2 groups, but then the teachers will come together and perhaps read the novel in the 2 languages, and then the child takes their book home in the language, English or German, and do their additional work, or they do some work in the small group work. So it's very clever the way they work together upstairs. So that changes a little bit. And then they're meant to learn Spanish, but they don't learn Spanish until they have English and German. So a Chinese child coming, for example, will be learning English, learning very basic German, and not Spanish yet.
Yeah.
And once they've got far enough in their English, then they can start to take on
Yeah,
Spanish.
we've got the same philosophy with that.
Otherwise, they're taking 3 languages that they don't speak in.
It's very crazy.
Yeah.
It's too much.
Yeah. So, I mean, an unusual situation happened in our school where I've got a sick Dutch teacher, and there was no cover for this Dutch teacher. And so I had to think quickly about creating a project that the fluent students could do in Dutch, with minus a Dutch teacher. And then it became an opportunity, a big opportunity, because I've just gone in there with a dual language project. So I've gone in there as a science teacher, doing all about the flooding in the Netherlands and the concepts behind flooding, the science behind flooding, the moon phases and the high tides and all the rest of it. So I'm teaching them stuff which is building on from their classroom. So group 6 and 7 are together. They're doing astronomy and they're learning about space and they're working with each other. So then I'm building up on those concepts. And then they're translating it back into Dutch and presenting in Dutch. And then occasionally I get a Dutch teacher who's able to be free alongside, who literally is doing what just happened in that video there.
Complementing what you're
So she talks about what I'm talking about the moon, and I'm talking about it in English, and they're pulling 2 things together and doing with what you did with your teacher. I said, no, I'm lost now, and they'll come and they'll talk to me about it and explain to me in English the concept. But the thing is, it's that the concepts are difficult concepts, they're science concepts, and so they're having to think in a very high way in 2 languages about a difficult 3rd concept, and they can do it. They can do
And
it.
this is the important thing, because they're able to then do their deep thinking
Yes.
in their language,
Yeah.
and then access that in English,
Yes.
which they can't normally do when
No.
your Dutch teacher's sick.
No?
Oh, we're not sick.
Yeah.
And so it's a really interesting
Yeah.
it's a really interesting thing, because when we've presented on what we do here at conferences and things, people say, yeah, but that's because you're a small school.
Yeah.
And I go,
to do with it.
that's to do with a decision about how you teach. And so a lot of the research, a lot of these kind of books about 2-way bilingual programs and CLIL and
Yeah.
second language learning and so on, a lot of research comes out of the United States of America or Canada with some really interesting programs. But they have very often, mostly, children who start in 1st grade and go right the way through the school. Well, we haven't got that. So we can't do the Mondays are English, Tuesdays are German, Wednesdays are
Yeah.
English, Thursdays are German, because you've got children who would spend Tuesdays and Thursdays going, what's going on? I don't understand anything. You know, it's got to be integrated.
Yeah.
And so our question there when we started was, how do we do this? We can't do 50-50 for those children who have been here for a long time and 90%, 10% for those children who've just started. So how do we do this? And that's when we said, why do you take children out of the classroom? Why don't we bring the teacher in? And that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
You're just doing it in the reverse, is it?
Yeah, yeah. And it's really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in our case, I think that is easier because Catalan and Castellano are two different languages, but they are very similar.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we haven't got this problem because for the first day with the pupils who only speaks Castellano Español, we don't have problem in telling or translating into Catalan because they are similar.
Yeah.
But for me, it's difficult to understand two different languages so different to understand because they don't have the same base.
Yeah.
For me, it's difficult.
Yeah. And for the children too, when they come, you know, a Korean child or a Japanese child or a Chinese child. They come into a classroom with two different languages. So that's why we try to partner them with other Korean or Japanese or Chinese children or Finnish or whatever they are in the classroom. And then it's just a little token, but once a week, our Japanese children and our Korean children have a Korean teacher and a Japanese teacher. To work, they only work with them 1 hour a week.
Yeah.
But you should see them. We can speak our own language, and it has to do with identity. It has to do with they can ask questions about. I don't understand what's happening in the classroom. It's just really helpful just to have that little bit of contact. And then the contact with the other student in the school, or even if it's not in their own class, to have a buddy from another class to be able to come and speak to them in the day and say, "Are you okay? Anything you need?" So that they have that understanding, and then they work with the new languages quickly, but it's tiring. You know, it's hard. It's hard for little children. They're tired at the end of the day.
But in our case, thinking now, I think that we got a very similar situation with when they are learning English. Because English is very different from Catalan and from Spanish. So what we do in the class is speaking English the vast majority of the time in the class, because if not, it's impossible. So it works. So sometimes we also speak English outside of the class, because if not, it's English inside the class and we forget English. And we try to do more hours in English and speaking in English in the corridors or
That's so interesting, because it's really interesting, because when we first looked at this project, it was the year before we started as us, and I went to Bulgaria, to a school in Bulgaria who said yes, they wanted to be part of a project. And they had 3 English lessons in the week, and that was all the English they had. And the teacher said, I so want to be part of this project because we don't do anything else in English. And the European Council said no. Erasmus said no to them being part of the project, which is why we then went on for the next year. But I said to her, you go and work with the crafts teacher in Bulgarian, and you speak to the children in Bulgarian. They're the same children that you teach in English.
Yes.
Why don't you do it in English?
Yes.
Wow, I never thought of that. Yeah, I could. You know, and then they started, I think, to work in some subject areas where they were linked up anyway.
Yeah. And we've got Dutch teachers in the classroom, in the main classrooms, who are fluent in English and they're teaching in English. But they could easily switch to Dutch in certain areas. And teach certain aspects. Oh, we're going to do our cooking in Dutch. Or There's absolutely no reason not to.
Oh, they're all infusing about your lovely class.
Fantastic, loved it.
Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yes, thank you so much.
I just need to go say goodbye to Martin. And The pizzas are on their way. So I'll be back in a minute. Just with a family that's leaving today.
Yeah.
On Wednesdays, the children go home at 12:30.
Okay.
The other days they stay till 3:30. But Wednesdays we have staff meetings till 4:30.
Yeah.
And just teachers, but the children go home at 12:30.
Yeah.
So I'll be back. I just need to say goodbye to the school just for a minute.
So
Very exciting.
there is pizza in the cafeteria
Yeah.
for all the teachers in the school.
Oh.
So I think we have lots of money in the budget. And then it's also good because then you really meet the teachers. So
Yeah.
they're only allowed to eat pizza if they're talking to you. And you're only allowed to eat pizza if you're talking to them. So please go and meet and mingle. But the teachers will take 5 minutes to get there. So if you want to take a couple of minutes as well.
Okay.
But not too long because then they'll only be the margarita. But it's in the cafeteria, please go at your own.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I still feel it in my stomach.
Let's go.
Потом еще посмотреть, потом еще это время это тоже играет нашу семью. Manoli,
Yes.
How many men do you have in your school?
Two men.
Two men. I remember two men.
We only
yeah.
have two men.
Yeah,
The
ladies
vast
school.
majority
Yeah.
of the
Ladies
teachers
school.
are women.
Like us. Like us.
Yes, it's the same case. I don't know why,
But it happens in the
yes.
There are more women teachers than men.
Yes.
So,
Seven.
from this year, only from this school year,
Yes.
we have seven men and young men.
And young
Yeah, only from this school year.
and the women, the teachers, women say, oh, we haven't got men in this school. And they are happy when one man go to the school to teach. Oh,
Мы так счастливы, что приходят мужчины.
yes. And especially in infantile education, the kindergarten, no, in infantile education, we got very, very, very few men.
А в киндергарten вообще нету.
So we had, until last year, we had one woman in the infantile education. But it's strict.
I saw education system in Sweden, in kindergartens only men. Only men. Yes.
Yes.
They explained me this rule because a lot of singular parents family with
Yes.
mother, but children must have influence of men.
Yes.
So kindergartens invite to work only men.
Only men.
Interesting. Yeah.
Maybe
Children must feel different.
Yes.
get some pizza.
Get some pizza.
Because in general, women have to protect.
Yeah, yes.
We are not the mother of the pupils. We are the teacher.
Тоже ей не то, что не нравится, но это особенность. Она говорит, что у нее, когда женщина учитель, она слишком очень много опекает. Да. Вот она вот эту вот функцию женщины, матери берет.
Умеют обстояться. Мужчины вообще умеют себя сберечь, поэтому они на расстоянии.
Риши. Where to go? Aha, I see. Hello. Мне вот эти нравятся приспособления.
То, что готовое уже. Мы делаем вот это руками, видишь?